Well, a few of my subscribers have asked me to do a walk-around video on my 1973 Triumph TR6. So I thought today would be a good day since it's the first day I've had it out for the spring of 2021. All freshly cleaned with all my spring tinkering projects completed. Hopefully the wind noise is not going to be too bad in this video, or the traffic noise. We'll do the best we can. So this is my 1973 Triumph TR6, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in just a second. So we'll break this video into a few different segments. The first segment we'll talk about how this car came to me. This car was actually from Alamo, California originally. I still have the original title, California title, and California license plate in the trunk, and I'll show you that a bit later. But it was imported from the US in January 7th of 2007, and it was brought up into Canada by a company called Drake's British Motors in Kelowna, British Columbia. I purchased the car from Drake's on April 29th, 2007, and had it shipped by rail across country to me in Toronto, Canada. And it arrived at my door probably about the first or second week of May 2007. And we'll go back a little bit further in history for all those history buffs. So the build date of this car on my heritage certificate was January 23rd, 1973. It was dispatched from the plant, British Leyland plant, on February 22nd, 1973, and it was delivered to the British Leyland Motors dealership in San Francisco. It shipped from the Samuel Williams Wharf in Dagenham on the vessel Norbeth. The commission number for this car is CF4874UO. And for those non-Triumph people, the U stands for left-hand drive. The O stands for overdrive, so the overdrive being a desirable option on this car. It is in new white, is the actual color. It is color code 19, according to the Triumph factory records. And it is a black trim car, which is code number 11. All right, change locations to try to get out of the wind, but I don't think this location's any better. Anyway, it's looking more like a proper roadster now with the top down. We enjoyed the drive over to this location. So the intent initially was just to repaint and redo the interior of this car. But when I received the car, it actually had some damage from the shipping on the rail car. For example, the exhaust was torn clean off the car. And there was a few other minor things that didn't work. The windshield wipers, for example, did not work. So I decided at that point, or shortly after that, I was going to be doing a full restoration on this car. So within a 2-week period of me getting the car, we actually started stripping it down to do a full frame off nut and bolt restoration. So the intent on this car was never to do a full frame off restoration. That only happened after I attended a 6-pack trials in Hershey, Pennsylvania that same year that I received this car. And there was a display from Ratco, who do aftermarket frames for these cars. And they had a Ratco frame next to a Triumph TR6 frame, a rather rusty TR6 frame. And I thought that it would be a good opportunity for me to check the frame condition on this car. Since I was going to the expense of doing all the paint and bodywork and interior work, I thought I would go one step further and get the body off and do a full nut and bolt frame off restoration on this car. So the restoration of this car took me 14 months to complete, and pretty much did everything on the car with the exception of the exterior panel paint. I did paint the interior and bottom of the body tub myself, but I was just kind of learning to paint at that point in time, so I had the actual exterior body farmed out. Wasn't a great paint experience. They had the car far longer than what was expected. They wanted to charge me more money than what was agreed upon, and the quality wasn't really any better, to be honest with you, than what I could do at home. So then I made the decision that the next Triumph project that I would do, which ended up being my 1960 Triumph TR3, I decided that I would do the entire painting process from start to finish. The body tub, all of the panels and the chassis were stripped down to bare metal. The body tub and the chassis were painted with Pour 15 before applying the top base coat that you see here. This is a base coat clear coat system. This is a Sikkens base coat clear coat paint. It's held up pretty well over the last 14 years that I've owned this car. And it is the new white paint, or as close as I could get to it. What I ended up doing was I ended up removing the original crash pad from the top of the dash. I had that buffed and I had that electronically scanned, and they mixed the paint for this car from that scan from underneath the crash pad, which was virgin, untouched, unfaded paint. I should mention that the car has an original metal hardtop in the original paint, and the actual hardtop still bears its original paint. And when the top is on the car, there's a slight difference between the stock paint and the paint that's on the car, but nothing too noticeable. And just remember that that stock hardtop has probably seen some fading over the years, so I would say that this color is fairly close to the original new white that this car left from the factory with. Not sure if I've mentioned this already, but this car actually has all of its original panels still intact, including the original floors and original sills. The only panel that was replaced during the restoration was the battery tray. That was a new battery tray that was welded in place, as they are prone to rust in that location from the battery acid, but the rest of the panels are original to the car. All right, let's have a wander around the exterior of the car, and I'll just tell you a little bit about what you see in front of you. We'll start with these overrider bars. They are made by Adco. They were an aftermarket add-on by the dealers, and they are kind of a love it or hate it option on these cars. They're fairly rare. You don't see them very often. That's kind of why I like them, but I actually quite like the look of the car with them on there anyway. The bumpers were newly re-chromed when I had this car restored, and we had the original bumpers re-chromed front and rear, as well as the overriders re-chromed, as opposed to getting a new replacement or a stainless steel replacement. The stainless steel exhaust, the polished stainless steel exhaust from Moss Motors, the Tourist Trophy exhaust, is a new addition. If you watched my last video, sounds great. The rack on this car, again, is another love it or leave it type option. This is actually a rack from a Triumph TR8 and TR7. It's a little flatter than the standard Triumph racks and a little bit wider. They are great if you tour with the car on long distances. They're good for a little bit of extra luggage, or maybe some chairs, for example. It comes in quite handy. I know it does not do anything for the lines of the car, but it's quite a functional piece. Obviously, these are aftermarket rims on the car. They are Koenig rewinds. They are 16-inch rims, 16 by 7 actually. They are graphite centers with the polished lips. I am running Yokohama Avid Ascend tires, 205/60/16 front and rear. We'll do a little piece on the interior afterwards. There you can see the front Amco bar. A couple of grill badges, one from Six Pack and one from my local club, the Toronto Triumph Club. I'm missing the enameling off my TR6 badge currently. It actually fell off, if you can believe that. The 73s had the lower chin spoilers. The earlier cars did not. 73 was the first year for that. So that is factory. Has the factory bullet mirror on the driver's side only. If you see a car with a additional mirror on the passenger side, it was an aftermarket addition. All right, let's talk about some of the things you can't see. Let's talk about the chassis and running gear and suspension mods to this car. So it is running the stock J-type overdrive. So it's got a 4-speed standard transmission with overdrive on 3rd and 4th gear, electronically operated overdrive. And if you're not familiar with Triumphs, that's operated by a stock here on the left-hand side of the column. It's the longer stock of the two. So that is the electronic overdrive. It has got a stock drive shaft and stock rear differential. So one of the things I'm really happy with is the stance of this car, and the suspension has been fairly heavily modified to get it to look this way. For starters, we're running Good Parts competition springs that are lowered 1 inch. In actuality, I've had to put spacers back in, so I've got a Good Parts spacer back in the front and rear. I was running the 16-inch rims. The bodywork was a little bit too close to the tires, running those 60 series tires, so there are spacers back in. We are running an oversized sway bar, match sway bar, front and rear in this car from Adco. We are running Koenig adjustable shocks in the front. We are running with the original lever shocks in the rear of this car, but they have been revalved and are heavy duty. Those were done by Peter at NOS Imports. I'm quite happy with the ride. The car originally came to me with a tube shock conversion that I removed after I had some issues with the frame fracturing. The car also utilizes the Good Parts adjustable camber brackets in the rear. It uses the Good Parts solid steering rack mounts in the front, and it also uses the Good Parts Nylotron bushing kit for both the front and the rear suspension of the car. So we'll talk a little bit about the interior of this car, and I'll start by answering the most frequently asked question, and that is, where did you get that roll bar? So this roll bar was produced in limited quantity. So I think there was a production run of about 20 of these done by a gentleman probably about 14 years ago. The gentleman's name was Francois, and if you were lucky enough to get one of these at the time, they are quite good looking in my opinion. They are not a frame mounted bar, so some people will frown on that. They are actually a plated bar on the rear shelf. I'm quite happy with it, and I really enjoy the look of these. And for those of you who are TR6 aficionados, you will know that the seats are not original to this car. These are actually 1969 TR6 seats. They are a 1 year only version with the folding headrest. They're fairly rare seats and hard to get a hold of. I do have the original seats for this car, which are the least comfortable seat offered in the TR6 range of seat options. There were 3 of them. It's a fairly standard stock interior otherwise. The dash is a replacement from the Roadster factory to try and mimic the stock dash that the car came with. There's very few modifications as far as the gauges are concerned. They're still running the original incandescent bulbs. They're not being converted to LEDs. I've got an additional adapter down there for a cigarette lighter that I use for my GPS. It does have a button there in the center of the radio blanking plate, and that is for an electric fan. We'll talk about that a little bit after. A little bit of bling with that billet shift knob. I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head. I believe they still offer those. If anybody's interested, I'll put that in the description field below. I'm a little bit bigger guy, so I've downsized the stock steering wheel and went with a 13-inch Modellita wood rimmed wheel. That fairly closely matches the dash. I think it looks pretty good. So the center console here was made by a company called Spitfire Options, and I quite like that console on long drives, and it provides me with a little bit of storage for things like change for toll booths, etc. And a cup holder. All right, a little tour of the engine bay. As you can see, we've got the stock 2.5 liter inline 6 as intended by Triumph. This engine has very little work done to it. It's been fully rebuilt. It has the stock camshaft in it. The only thing that's really been done to this block is the head has been shaved to give me 9.5 to 1 compression, and we've used the shorter push rods in there as well. So as you can see, we're still running the stock cast iron exhaust manifold, so no header on this car. We're also running with the stock Zenith Stromberg carburetors. They are blinged up a little bit with the K&N filters. These carburetors were micro-polished and rebuilt by a company called Paultec back in the day. That was about, again, 14 years ago or so ago. A few other blingy bits. So a polished stainless steel radiator shroud. This is from Good Parts. We have the Wizard aluminum radiator with a pusher fan mounted on the other side, and I've showed you the switch that turns that on. It's just a manual fan if we get stuck in traffic or stuck at the border, for example. then we can flip that fan on and cool the car off. All right, you can see that we are still operating with the original emissions that this car came with. We have everything hooked up as far as that's concerned, and the carbon canister is here up front with the anti-run-on valve. One of the questions I get asked about quite often as well is about this heat shield on the underside of the bonnet. This was purchased from a company called, I think it was called 928 Leather Shop, and I think they've just recently changed their name. They do have an eBay store, so I'll put that link in the description below as well if you're interested in getting one of these. I am still running the stock mechanical fan. As you can see, that's the red fan down there, which is correct for this year. I'm doing this similar setup for the TR250 with the manual electric fan and the yellow plastic fan on the 250, which is correct. So we've still got the alternator. It's not an upgraded alternator. This is a standard Lucas alternator. We do have a Lucas Sport coil on here. We do have the Petronix electronic ignition installed with the MagnaCore competition wires. We have an aftermarket Triumph Tune aluminum valve cover with the Le Mans style fasteners that have some nice patina on them now. All right, we are still running with the mechanical fuel pump that you see down there. That's that gold colored top. A lot of the guys have converted to electric pumps on these cars, but I'm sticking with the stock mechanical. It is has been a little bit of an issue on this car. I've gone through a couple of mechanical pumps since I've owned it. I actually carry both a spare mechanical pump and a spare electric pump in the trunk for longer trips, just in case. I do have actually a fuel inline shutoff valve in the fuel line there, so I can shut off the fuel to the carbs and run them dry if I want to. I do also have a battery shutoff switch here on the battery, so to cut the power quickly if need be. That is an excellent upgrade, highly advised. We do have on the other side, as mentioned, here is the custom stainless steel fuel line from Francois, the same guy that did the door sills and the roll bar. So that's a nice addition there with the stainless steel lines. One of his other great additions is this emergency bonnet release. This is also done by Francois. It's too bad he doesn't make those anymore. They're very high quality and they are a piece of art. All right, we'll take a quick look at the boot or the trunk. And it's pretty standard in here with the black trunk panels. It needs a little bit of work on some paint there, but that's to be expected if you're carrying luggage or lots of luggage in this car. On long trips, you're going to get some marking in the back of this trunk. So it is a fairly large trunk. You can get quite a bit of stuff in here, including a full set of golf clubs if you take the woods out and put those in the passenger seat. But it's fairly good from a sports car perspective, let's say. It does have a full-size spare under the trunk board and under the carpet. Some spare parts I keep under there. My toolkit is a mainstay of this car, just in case I need to do any roadside technical sessions. And we have a watertight Pelican case that just holds some of my electronics. You know, spare router, spare points, spare condenser, spare plugs, that kind of stuff. Stuff you don't want to get wet. So it's a pretty standard looking trunk in this car. Nothing too special about it, just neat and tidy. We'll just do one more wander around the car with the boot and bonnet lid up. And maybe we'll take it for a little spin to an area where we can do a little bit of a driving video or a little flyby video so you can hear the sound of the car, maybe hear the sound of the engine. Maybe we'll go back to our first location and we'll zip around the parking lot there. We'll set up the camera on a tripod. It's a little bit smaller than that Cadillac behind it. Not sure what year that Cadillac is. I'm going to guess and say 55. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. All right, let's pack up and move to another location. A little bit of video with the engine running. There's where we're at after a bit of a run up to temperature. There's that new Moss Tourist Trophy exhaust. It's got a nice note to it. Hopefully you can hear that okay. Alright, we'll set up the tripod and we'll do a little, won't be much of a flyby. It's a fairly small parking lot, but we'll do a definite drive-by. Safe and sound in the Tush Mahal, and one thing I did forget to mention as far as upgrades are concerned has to do with the drivetrain in this car. So I am using the stock differential as mentioned. I'm actually using the stock sliding axles in the rear as well, but I did fail to mention that I've got the upgraded Richard Good hubs in the rear of this car. So that is a big All right, that will end the virtual tour of my 1973 Triumph TR6. I'm sure there are things that I've forgotten to tell you about it in the video, but I did my best. If you have any questions about this car, please mention it in the comments section and I'll do my best to respond to you. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, commenting, and subscribing. If you are not subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing and clicking on the notification bell, and you will be notified of any uploads I do on this car in particular, or any of my Triumphs that I'm working on in the future. Thanks, guys.